Howdy everyone, and welcome back to the CrappieEngineer YouTube channel. I'm just going to get right into the notes I've written down for this video. So, there's a book called Notes from the Underground that was written by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Forgive my pronunciation of his name. And I read this very recently, and it kind of wrecked me a little bit. So, basic synopsis is that it's about a man so intelligent and so aware of his own mind that the awareness itself kind of becomes his disease. And this sort of renders him unable to act and unable to connect with anyone. And the entire time I was reading it, I kept picturing one specific cartoon character, Squidward Tentacles. So this is a deep dive into one of the bleakest yet most important novels I think I've ever read. And somehow it maps almost perfectly onto a clarinet-playing octopus who works a cash register at a underwater fast food restaurant. Alright, so before getting into some parallel character analysis, I'm kind of going to go a little bit more into this book, so if you've already read this book or listened to it or whatever, feel free to skip this. So, the book splits into two parts. Part 1 isn't really a story, it's more of like a rant from the narrator. The narrator, and we never really get his name, he kind of just calls himself the Underground Man, and he sits alone in a rundown apartment and tells you flat out that he's a sick man and a spiteful man and an unattractive man. Then he spends pages kind of explaining why he believes all of these things about himself. So his whole argument is that being fully conscious of yourself, truly aware of every motive and every flaw as it happens, is not really a gift. It's more of a disease, and most people are just able to act, and they want something, and they go get it. And he is physically unable to do this because of his mental blocks. So every time he wants something, he immediately sees 10 reasons why wanting itself is stupid or fake or beneath him ultimately. And by the time he's done thinking it through, the moment to actually act is gone. And he calls the ordinary, decisive kind of person a man of action. And he genuinely envies this person, because the man of action never stops to examine himself long enough to talk himself out of anything. He just does. So, he also goes after this idea that was popular at the time that humans are fundamentally rational. And if you just laid out the mathematically correct path for everyone's happiness, people would obviously take it. He says no, they would not do this. He says people will deliberately choose something stupid, something completely against their own interests, just to prove they still have free will. Hand humanity a perfect, logical utopia, and people would find a way to smash it out of pure spite, just to prove they're not a piano key that only ever plays one note. It's built to play. And this is kind of a wild claim for this book, and to build a whole philosophy on. But it's the entire engine of the book, and consciousness without action is a trap, and people would rather wreck their own lives than feel they never had a choice in them at all. So next is part 2, which is kind of where you actually watch this play out. So there's a dinner scene where the underground man hears an old classmate is getting a farewell party, and this is a guy that he genuinely can't stand, and he invites himself anyway to this party. All night he swings between desperately wanting this group to respect him and insulting them out of pure defensive pride, because some part of him has already decided they look down on him. So he strikes first before they get a chance to clap back at him, and it goes exactly as badly as you'd expect for this guy. Then later that same night he ends up with a young woman named Liza, and for one small stretch of the book something real actually happens. He speaks with her honestly, and there's not really a performance, or pride, or ulterior angle for him. And she responds to it, genuinely, because it's probably the first honest thing anyone's ever said to her in a long time. And she actually shows up at his apartment a few days later, looking for the same honesty again from him. And so here's the part of this section of the book that actually gets me, and it's the moment she's actually standing there in front of him, vulnerable and hoping for the same real thing they had, and he's just unable to let this happen. Being truly seen like that terrifies him, worse than being alone ever did. So he humiliates her instead, and says something cruel enough to push her straight out the door. And then on the same page, he regrets it almost instantly, and he runs after her, but by the time he chases after her, she's already gone. So this kind of shows where he had one real connection available to him in this entire book, and his own pride killed it before it ever had the chance to become anything. Alright, so here's Squidward. Squidward believes almost all the way down to the center of his soul that he is simply better than everyone around him. He believes he has better taste, a greater depth of character, and that he's ultimately a real artist trapped amongst idiots. He plays his clarinet alone in his apartment constantly, and it's almost never actually shared with anyone successfully, and when people do end up hearing him, it's usually just played as a joke by the show. Not really because he's untalented. The show kind of goes back and forth on that idea, but because he's always presenting it from behind a wall of superiority instead of just putting it out there and letting people respond to it honestly. And almost every single day of the show, SpongeBob knocks on that door, wants to hang out, and wants to include him. And he offers a completely uncomplicated invitation to connect with Squidward. And 9 times out of 10, Squidward slams the door, groans, or just insults him on the way out. And this is not because this invitation is bad, but I think it's ultimately because accepting it means admitting he actually wants this connection with other sea creatures. And admitting he wants it means that he's not really above needing anyone else. So that's kind of the exact same trade the underground makes with Lisa. He rejects the real thing because being seen, wanting it, feels almost worse than staying completely alone. Now, there is one episode where this whole trap almost swallows Squidward whole. This episode being Band Geeks. So, at the beginning of this episode, Squidward's old rival from school, Squilliam, calls to rub his success in his face. And cornered and a bit humiliated on the spot, Squidward lies to Squilliam and says that he already has his own band in the works, and that they could take his spot playing the Bubble Bowl. So now Squidward's stuck. So he does the one thing his entire personality says he should never do. He goes and recruits the whole town to be his band, SpongeBob and Patrick included. He attempts to turn them into a band overnight, and at first he treats every single one of them with the exact same contempt you would expect from Squidward. He treats them like they're beneath him, and they're just amateurs, and he's ultimately just using them to save face in front of Squilliam. So here's kind of the turn of the episode. Somewhere in the middle of actually building the band up, he can't keep the wall up anymore, and he has to really work with these people and rely on them. He has to commit to the performance overall, instead of just narrating from a safe distance away. And it works for him. And it's not because he suddenly respects everyone as equals and in some clean redemption arc for Squidward. The show never really gives him that. But it's kind of because for one episode he does the actual thing instead of protecting his own internal ideal of himself. The town, these are the same people he treats like they're beneath him every other day of the year. And they show up for him completely. And together all of them pull off one of the most triumphant moments in the entire show as they successfully play the Bubble Bowl halftime show. And that's really the whole difference between Squidward and SpongeBob as characters. It's that SpongeBob never once manages how he's perceived by others. He's completely embarrassingly present in whatever he's doing. Whether that's flipping patties, blowing bubbles, jellyfishing, or failing his boating test for the 100th time in a row, he's never really aiming to protect an image of himself he has built up behind his eyes. It's because it never once occurs to him that he needs something like this. And because of that, people are drawn toward him constantly. Patrick, Sandy, even Mr. Krabs in his own greedy way, they all orbit around SpongeBob's total lack of self-consciousness. So, I kind of mentioned this back in my very first video on this channel as well, and it's that committing fully to the actual work without needing it to mean something bigger at first is the whole move. This video is really just that same idea, and it's pointed at people instead of patties. So, ideally, you just commit to the real thing fully without managing how it makes you look, and connection will show up as a side effect for you. You don't need to chase connection directly, you chase the work, and the people will find their way into your lives. So, here's where this actually lands. The underground man had one real shot at connection in the entire book, and his own awareness of himself killed it before it could turn into anything. Squidward gets very similar shots over and over again. Every single time SpongeBob knocks on that door, and most days Squidward just decides to kill it as well. And it's for almost an identical reason as the underground man. He's protecting the idea of himself that he's more comfortable with than actually being known and respected by others. But Every once in a while, like one accidental band performance, the wall comes down for Squidward. And it turns out that the thing on the other side of it wasn't so bad after all. And ultimately, it can be very life changing for most people. So, if there's a lesson sitting underneath a Russian narrator with no name and a clarinet playing octopus, it's gonna be this. You need to stop managing how you look long enough to actually do the thing, and stop protecting your pride, the one time somebody's actually trying to reach you. So, that's kind of the whole trap, and it's also the whole way to escape this trap. Howdy, guys. Thank you for watching another CrappieEngineer production. If you've read Notes from the Underground, let me know of what you thought of it in the comments. And if you haven't, it's not a very long book, and it's definitely worth picking up. Um, Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll talk to all of y'all soon.